My Grandma Has Changed. Written by David Stelzl. My grandmother was always a loving and caring person. Well, at least until she came back from that hiking trip she took with the senior center. After that, she cursed all the time, got mad at me, and forgot a whole lot. Sometimes she just forgot what day of the week it was, but more and more often she didn't know who I was, or who she was herself. I was lucky that on one of her good days I was able to persuade her to go with me to her doctor. Dr. Marves diagnosed her with advanced dementia and advised her to move to a nursing home or some other facility, because soon I would not be able to take good enough care of her. And boy, how he was to be proved right. I thanked him, but didn't tell him that we couldn't afford a place in a nursing home. We could barely pay for our small flat. My grandmother had practically no income at all, and what I earned delivering pizzas wasn't the world either. There were no other family members who could help us out. They were either already dead or left us years ago. Damn drugs. And so, it was up to me to do my best to take care of grandmother, even if it wasn't easy. This woman had always raised me when my drug-addicted mother could not. I owed her that. "I made you some soup, Grandma. Are you hungry?" "Hungry? Yes, thank you, good man." She must have thought I was her waiter. She sat in her favorite armchair, and I brought her the soup on a tray. "Thank you very much. I don't have any money with me, but my husband will tip you in a minute." Sure. Thank you very much, ma'am." I read on the internet that sometimes it's just best to play along. It was easier that way for the sufferers, and also for us relatives. Instead of eating the soup, she just stared at it for a few minutes. Then a fly sat down on the edge of the plate and flew away shortly afterwards. That had somehow caught her attention. She followed the fly with her eyes. The fly seemed to be more interested in her soup than she was. Finally, it sat down again at the edge of the plate and probably wanted to eat its fill of the soup. But it didn't happen, because Grandma grabbed the fly with lightning speed and precision and stuffed it into her mouth. It was disgusting to watch, but at least she got some protein. About a week after she ate the fly for the first time, things got really strange. I woke up in the middle of the night because the neighbors were fighting again. Or beating each other up, who knows. If I was going to be awake, I thought I might as well have a sip of milk. So I walked over to the tiny kitchen. I know you don't do that, especially if you don't live alone, but I just drank from the carton instead of grabbing a glass. While I was drinking, I looked around the kitchen a bit, and thanks to the moonlight, I could see that something was sitting on the table. I spat out the milk and almost had a heart attack when I saw it was my grandma. She was just sitting there, arms wrapped around her knees, and smiling. Her mouth was so wide open that her smile no longer looked human, and she didn't move an inch. Not a muscle twitched. She didn't even blink. "Oh, Grandma, please go back to bed. You can't stay here all night." Slowly she turned her head in my direction, staring at me straight in the eye now, still with that inhuman grin. I sprinted out of the kitchen into my room and closed the door behind me, the milk carton still in my hand. I knew I was childish. The poor woman was just sick. But that wide mouth scared the hell out of me. I didn't come out of my room until the sun was shining bright, which was around 10 o'clock, and then only because I had to pee so badly. Slowly and very carefully, I looked around the corner into the kitchen and was very relieved when I saw that Grandma was no longer sitting on the table. After I had gone to the toilet, I looked to see where Grandma was. I found her in her bed. Judging by the smell, she had boiled herself. I cleaned her and her bed. The rest of the day, she was as lethargic as usual. She seemed to have no memory of what had happened last night. Nothing strange happened over the next few days. Well, it was more the things that didn't happen that made my fear of her grow and grow. For example, she stopped eating. Completely. Sometimes she would stare into space for hours without blinking once. At some point, I also stopped talking to her. I was too afraid of a reaction I might not like. 8 days after our meeting in the kitchen, things finally got out of hand. We were in the small living room watching TV when she started making strange clicking noises with her mouse. The noises sounded so inhuman, I didn't even know how she was making them. My fear of her gave way somewhat to a greater fear that she might have a stroke and die. I went over to her and grabbed her shoulder to see if she was okay. She jerked her head towards me and stared at me with eyes that somehow no longer looked human. It looked as if there were several smaller pairs of eyes hidden in her eyes. I was so scared and confused that I couldn't defend myself when she bit in my arm. The bite was really deep and hurt like hell. Panic-stricken, I tried to free my arm, but her jaw had really dug into my forearm and I couldn't get it free. It was necessary to punch her in the face with my fist to free myself. Another thing I was not very proud of. After that day, the thought of just running away and starting over on my own was constantly in my mind. I had no money for a clinic or a nursing home, and I wasn't even sure she belonged there anymore, so I had to leave her here. For about 2 days after the bite, I had high fever and felt absolutely drained. I hoarded water bottles in my room and locked the door. Only when I really had to go to the toilet, I did go out. That's how scared I was. During those days, I didn't see or hear her. When I finally felt a little better, I packed my backpack, just in case I needed it. And my goodness, I was going to need it very soon. After packing it, I thought it would be best to see if my grandmother was still alive. The door to her room was closed. Cautiously, I opened it and looked into the room. I couldn't see anything because the light was off and the windows must have been covered with excrement. But through the light coming in through the open door, I saw something. In the corner where her bed was, there was now a large... I don't know what it was. The closest thing I could have called it was a cocoon. As I pointed my smartphone at the structure of cobwebs to see it better, I saw 6 little eyes staring directly into my own. I ran out of her room, pounded her door shut, and grabbed my backpack. Even when I was already on the street and running towards the bus stop, I kept looking over my shoulder every few seconds. I took the bus to the next town and rented a shabby hotel room there. That was all I could afford. It took a week before I regretted my decision. This was the woman who had raised me, and she was still in that flat. What if it wasn't her that was changing, but something inside her that was changing her? Something that had been slowly eating away at her brain since she had been on that hike. I decided to go back and put her out of her misery, because she didn't deserve such a life. When I arrived, I carefully opened the door, which was unlocked. She was not in the hallway, nor in the kitchen, nor in my room, or the bathroom, or the living room. I knew what that meant. I opened the door to her room and held a large torch pointed at a place where the cocoon had been a week ago. What I saw there was even more disturbing than what I saw the last time. The cocoon was open, and in front of it and next to it was slime and skin, I guess. Whatever came out of that cocoon, and it wasn't my grandma, it was gone. I wanted to go back to the hotel, but I had forgotten where it was. I've been forgetting a lot of things lately, and in my head was a strange idea. The idea that I had to meet and listen to a man of peace. And my arm hurt so much. Did something bite me? Part 2. The Hike of Horror. I was glad that the senior centrum had organized this hiking trip. The bus we were now taking to the mountains was old and rickety, but I didn't mind. After all, the excursion was free of charge. That was nice, because I couldn't have afforded anything else. At 70, I could no longer work, and I didn't get a pension. We could only afford the small flat I shared with my grandson, because he delivered for a pizzeria and earned some money. He was such a good boy. I'm sure he was happy to have the place to himself for a few days. I couldn't blame him. I only wish I could have given him a better life. But I didn't want to dwell on negative thoughts now. After all, this was my first holiday in 20 years. And who knows when I would take the next one. While a few men at the front of the bus sang, "Up on the yellow wagon," I looked at the map again. For the fact that we were all seniors, I thought the walk was quite ambitious. We would hike for almost 6 hours and then spend the night in a hut that was provided for us. I was amazed at how hyped some of the others were, especially the men. They started flirting with the women, as if we were on a school trip, but I didn't begrudge them that. After all, I knew the feeling of being old, worthless and lonely. This was a welcome change. When we got off the bus, I immediately felt the pleasant warmth of the sun on my skin. That was nice. It was late summer and perfect hiking weather. The trail itself also offered a beautiful view of the nearby mountain range and forests. As I suspected, we had to take more breaks than planned. The social worker leading the trip was starting to get worried. Apparently, we weren't making enough miles. The problem was, if I read the map correctly, there were no other huts or buildings except ours, so we had to reach them today, preferably before sunset. Marching through the undergrowth in the dark with 16 senior citizens was an adventure I could do without. And I'm sure the social worker, I think his name was Tim, felt the same way. When we took another break, he told us that we had to hurry a little to reach the hut before nightfall. His tone was friendly but firm. Despite his speech, the pace did not increase, and it was slowly getting dark. Now, the first of us were getting nervous. When it was really dark, Tim tried to calm us down. He told us that we would now walk a little slower and that everyone should pay attention to the person next to them. We didn't really trust him, because somehow it looked as if Tim had lost his way. He was constantly turning the map. Luckily, Gerhard had a small torch with him that he could lend him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have seen anything at all. We all moved a little closer together. In this forest, it was somehow quite creepy. We were all adults, but all those noises in the dark made us nervous. Jose panicked everyone when he said that there was someone up ahead, a bit of the path, watching us. And somehow, it did look like someone was standing there. Tim ran back to the place where the small commotion had broken out and tried to calm us down. Surely, no one would be standing there in the middle of the night in the forest. He pointed the torch at the shadow. We could not believe our eyes. There was a little boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. As he came closer to the light, I could see that he was wearing a red jacket with a funny pin on it. It had a smiley face, and around it were the words, "Team Peace." The boy introduced himself to us as Lucas. He told us he was lost and needed to find his little brother. The others were relieved and gladly took Lucas with them, but I didn't trust him. Why was he standing in the middle of the forest instead of staying on the hiking trail, which was clearly visible? And why did he say he only wanted to find his brother? What about the rest of his family? There was something wrong with this boy, but I couldn't say anything. Who would believe me? And if they believed me, what were we going to do? Abandon a little boy in the forest at night? So we took him with us. He refused to give his huge backpack to Tim, preferring instead to continue carrying it himself. My mood improved when we finally reached the hut. Exhausted, we quickly ate our sandwiches and then lay down directly in the awful cots that were spread all over the large living room. Although I felt a bit queasy, I quickly fell asleep. That's just how it was when you got old. My hearing worked well, however, so I woke up in the middle of the night. Someone was on the phone. "Yes, sir, Mr. Man of Peace. Yes, I'll start the injection. First the spiders, then the elixir on the other half." "Roger that, sir. Experiment will start." It was Lucas. I wondered how the little guy was receiving here and slowly opened my eyes. It took quite a bit of effort somehow. When I managed to open them, I saw him. He was bending over Conchetta. In the moonlight, I could see that he had a glass and tweezers, and that the poor thing was twitching as something crept into her nostril. I couldn't see what it was, though. They were too far away. Panicked, but also angry, I tried to sit up, but could not. My body no longer obeyed me. The devilish boy noticed my effort and came over to me. He smiled at me. "You are paralyzed. It will soon pass, don't worry. My boss and I will help you." I was so scared. Now I saw what he had in a big jar. They were small, fat spiders with a strange greenish glow. Reflexively, I tried to scream for help, but that didn't work either. He grabbed one of the spiders with the tweezers and placed it on my upper lip. I could feel it slowly crawling through my nose into my skull and settling into my brain. Lucas left after he was finished with us. As I am writing this, I already notice I start to forget what happened. Please be aware of this boy, the man of peace, and his team Peace. They are dangerous. Hey horror fans, this is David the author. Did you like my stories? All of them play in the same universe. So please subscribe and click here for another video.